Okay, so here's our file that we're working with. And we'll look at all the layers that we have. Actually, in your book, if you do have your book, turn to page 200, I think it's 254 or 256. Because it talks about the different file formats that you can save it as. Yeah, excuse me, 257. 257 lists out a couple of different formats that you can have. Right now, if I was to save this file in Photoshop, Shift-Command-S does a save as. You've got your different formats that are down here, and my Photoshop format is kind of the default one. Let's save all these to the desktop. Of course, you can give it a name. PSD is the extension to it. Pay attention to the options that you have below. One of the options allows you to save the layers. And in this one, I've got a lot of different layers. If I was to click the open arrow, I get a couple of other different options that I can change things as. JPEG is a very common one. Of course, this is the one that most computers can recognize, certainly on the web. TIFF is a good printing file format. Here's the two differences between these two. JPEG is the compression kind of file format. You're going to lose a little bit of quality if you save something as a JPEG. A TIFF allows you to not compress it. It's lossless. You'll keep 100% of your quality of your image. And so if I was a graphic designer and I needed to send this to a professional printer, usually a TIFF is what they require that I can send it to. The downside is, by not losing any of the quality, my file size is going to be huge. Let's look at a TIFF. Notice that it changes my extension up here as well. I'm going to keep the layers. That's another advantage of using a TIFF, is you can have all of your layers, and I'll hit save. Actually, let's add the word layered to it. Layered. Now it'll be saved to the desktop. It'll open up my TIFF options, and a lot of these we can change or we can keep the same. Here's my image compression. I can, if I wanted to, compress it. To be honest, I don't know the difference between any of these. Usually I keep it at none. And for the same thing over here, I won't do any compression for these as well, or byte order. We'll say OK. Let's jump to my desktop. There it is, saved right here. Let's look at the size of it. On my computer, if you're using a Macintosh, you can select any file, go up to File, come on, and go down to Get Info. Command-I is the keyboard shortcut. With this info, I can see things like how large my file is, and there it is at 116 megabytes. That's a huge, huge file to be able to send over the internet. Let's do the same thing. This time I'm going to flatten out my layer. Shift-Command-S, do Save As. This one we'll call Flat. Flat. Down at the bottom, all I'm going to change is uncheck the layers. And it's going to give me a little warning saying, hey, I have to save a copy of this. In other words, it's going to make a duplication of the file I'm on. But it's going to take all of my layers and flatten it down to one solid background layer. We'll hit save. We'll say OK to this. Don't worry about the options. And here's my flat version for here. Let's look at the file size difference between these two. Get info. And it's drastically different. The one that has layers over 100 megabytes, this one is less than, more than half the size of it, down to 36 megabytes. This is much easier to send through online or to somebody else. They'll both print exactly the same. They'll both be the best quality and everything else is great. The only difference is, if I tried to open up my flattened version in Photoshop, it's not going to give me the editable layers that I may need if I'm working with another graphic designer. So quality-wise, they're the same. They just don't have the same edit ability for this one. Let's close this one out. Some of the other file formats that you can choose from. So file, let's do Save As. Let me show you JPEG real quick. So here's JPEG. We won't worry about layers. Actually, JPEG, automatically, you cannot save layers in a JPEG. It's going to flatten it regardless. So one disadvantage for using a JPEG is that you can't re-edit what you have. You're going to lose all of these layers. But in doing so, here's my compression. I can say what quality of a JPEG do I want it to be. If I bring it up larger, it'll be a larger file size. If I do, let's do a small quality, a really low quality thing. We'll say OK to this. Let's see how large that JPEG is when I save this one. Hey, now I've got it to a little over a megabyte. And if I was looking at it on the screen, that's actually not too bad. I can't really tell too much of a difference based on my eye. The thing is I can't blow it up, and I've definitely lost some of the colorization to what I have. There's the JPEG and there's the TIFF. Can barely see a major difference between the two. So sometimes JPEG comes in handy, sometimes not. Now there are other file formats that you can save things as. If I was to save it again, look how many that I have. So I've got this listing out. Some of these, to be honest, I've never used before in my life. I'll hit cancel. Let's go over to my little puppy dog. If I did a file and save as, this one's going to show me something a little bit different. Here's my TIFF. I've got a lot more file formats for this one than I did in the other one. Now, why is that? Why is it I can save some, like I have a PNG, I've got Targa, I've got DICOM. I've never used DICOM. I have no idea who uses that one. But I've got more options for this one than the other one. Here's why. The color mode that I'm working in plays another key advantage to your files that you're working in. If I go to image, to my mode, I'm working in RGB mode. Now what do we know about RGB? We talked about this in Illustrator. When is that one used?
Is that for print? No, that's for
not for print. It's
RGB's online.
For online, for screen. If I was to save this for something that's used for a website or to be displayed on a screen, this is my color mode. Check out the color mode I'm working with here. This one's for print. And so when I save this, some file formats are good for printing, some file formats are good for screen quality stuff. So I do save as, and I get the ability to save it as multiple different things. That's why sometimes you can or cannot save it for that. So what does this mean? Here's another option that you may want to be able to explore, is being able to save transparency in your images. Here's an example of when you may want to use transparency. I'm using PowerPoint. This is also true for websites, if you're making video games, if you're making interactive applications. You want to be able to take out the white of the background from here. This image is saved as a JPEG. JPEG does not save transparent pixels. It'll automatically just convert them to solid white. What I want to do is I want to say, hey, I want those pixels to be completely gone. So we'll jump back into here. You can see how I've done this. What is this called? Do y'all remember this from last time? What kind of mask is that? It's a layer mask. Vector mask does come up in a little bit. Layer mask lets me mask it out, and I can turn it on and off. You can see all I did was take out the white. If I was to save this, I need to be able to save it as a PNG file. Look at the options that come up. PNG doesn't do layers. That's okay. We'll replace the one I already have. It does let me save transparency from this one. It only has a few options. The second thing I can do is to control the quality of what I'm working with as well. Tell you what, I'm going to make a new document and show you really simply how the quality can change up depending on your file format. Let's make a simple sphere. Grab this, use all that looks good. Let's make it red. There we go. So if I wanted to save this image by itself, file, I can do a save as, and let's just save it as a JPEG. That'll be our baseline for what we're working with. And we'll keep it a nice high quality JPEG. Looks good. 115 kilobytes. Less than a megabyte, less than a tenth of a megabyte. Another way I can save images rather than save as is to go to export. And this is the one that I often mostly use if I have to save something for the web. There is a new type of export as. I don't like it as much. I like to do the save for web, which is the older way of doing it. Here's why. This will give me a preview of exactly what it looks like based on the kind of file format I choose. Saving for web, if you look over on the right-hand side, here's the different formats you can save from. So here's my JPEG that I saved it as. I can change up the quality of it. I can change up some more different things. And even if I look down at the bottom, you can see the size of this one, roughly what the size would be. So 68 kilobytes. If I change the quality, watch the quality change on your screen. There it is at 100% all the way down. Do y'all see a little bit of pixelation going on, especially around these edges? That'll give you a preview of what it looks like, and so you may or may not want to adjust it. What I like doing is changing up the GIF formats, or GIF formats, GIF, however that's pronounced. With the GIF, you can not only control the quality, but actually the number of colors that are on here. Right now I've got it set to 2. Your eyes can perceive up to 256 distinct colors, and that's a good round number, especially if you're into programming and doing 8-bit programming. 256 works out good. You can see all the colors that it takes to make up the sphere. Right now it's taking up 122 kilobytes. Watch this number change as I drop the number of colors that it takes to make this sphere. If I cut it in half, 128, image looks about the same. I've got half the number of colors and about half the size of my image. So it'll load up faster. It may be something that's really important for the website. Cut it in half again, 64. Still looks pretty good. Half the size there. Once we start getting into lower numbers, let's jump down to 16. Then I can really start to see it change up. I can see a little bit of banding, striations. It'll still load up quickly and look good. If I get down to 4 colors, you can definitely tell the difference. Only got 4 colors in my table. Down to 2 colors, then in this case it's just white and red. But at 19 kilobytes, I can load that up on the oldest phone that I have. Notice how it treated the shading on here. For those of y'all who've taken art, what is it called when you do a bunch of points to do shading? My art majors.
Stippling.
Stippling. You can do a stippled kind of effect to do this kind of shading. In graphic design, this is called dithering, and you can actually tell what kind of dithering you want. Diffused, I can make it like a little pattern, or I can do just random noise, and it adds a little bit more of a texture to it as well. So there's different ways that you would change this up. If I was to apply something like this to, say, my puppy, let's save this and export it as a low quality GIF. So right now I've got it set to 2 colors. What 2 colors are they? I've got the brown and I've got transparency. GIF can support transparency. If I turned it off, there we go. Now I can at least get some lights and darks on here. Increase the quality of it. So 4 colors will give me a puppy that looks like this. 8 colors will give me a little bit more detail, and I can move on and on from there to a full color rendering that looks pretty good. Still low quality, but it would load up nice and easy from this way. Another advantage of using a GIF, let's drop it back down to 4, is I can actually change up these colors that I have. If I don't want to work in browns and whites, let's say I wanted all of my browns, I can double click on it to be, let's make them blue. It'll go through and change all instances of that to this one. There's a great guy I follow on Twitter who does Lego art, and this is how he does it. He takes an image, he loads it up and makes a low quality GIF, and then he converts all the colors to the colors that Lego is, and he can put them all together and makes these huge mosaics using just Lego colors. Of course, you can make some really funky looking art with this as well. I'm just playing around for now. Okay, good enough. Hit save, save as, done. It'll also save that up as well. So when you work through these, it's very, very important to understand what your image is being used for. If it's going to be used for the web or something that's on a screen, make sure you save it as a friendly version that's able to do it. If you need transparency, even a GIF can handle animation. Those animated GIFs are able to be done in Photoshop as well. For this project, this one only needs to be, you need to save it as all 3 of them, but the one you're going to upload is going to be the flattened version of that TIFF. All cool? Any questions on this? When you go into the next project, again, I encourage you, if you finish up this one, go ahead and start on the second one. It's going to talk more about the vector drawing tools, how to use the pen tool, and how to do some vector simple drawing, the kind of things that we did in Illustrator in Photoshop. That's what I'm going to talk about next class period. But if you have any questions on this, I'll be able to answer.